Being Boss, a podcast for creative entrepreneurs from Emily Thompson and Kathleen Shannon. Welcome to episode 12, How to Be Boss Even When You Feel Like a Fraud, brought to you by FreshBooks Cloud Accounting.
Hey guys, so today's episode is all about being boss even whenever you don't feel like a boss. This episode is what to do whenever you feel like a fraud. And those feelings include having no idea what you're doing or not being able to imagine why anyone would want to pay you money to do what you do. But first, an announcement. We have decided to start a Being Boss YouTube channel. And if everything goes according to plan, this episode will be on YouTube. You can find that link on our show notes and on our website at lovebeingboss.com. So Emily and I decided to start a YouTube channel.
We're crazy, we know.
We just thought it would be a good way to get Being Boss out there to even more creatives. We also thought it would be a good excuse to get dressed. Emily and I are usually recording these. Like, Emily's usually in her bed.
Yeah.
I'm usually still in my robe, like no bra on, no makeup. We're close enough friends that like we can see each other like that, right. But we want to take it seriously, so we got dressed. We put on some makeup.
Yep, I got out of bed. I came to the studio.
Right,
it's pretty legit.
What's cool about the YouTube channel is that you are going to be able to see the entire unedited episode. So, what did you call it, Emily?
Being Boss Uncut.
It just makes me giggle. So you can see the entire episode, probably some bloopers that we're usually editing out on our YouTube channel. And before we move forward with our episode, I just want to remind you all and thank you all for reviewing us on iTunes. It really does help our ratings and it really does help us get to more people. So if you can just do us a huge favor and get on your computer, go to the iTunes Apple Store and click on podcasts.
Yes.
Search for Being Boss and just give us a little 5-star rating.
Right. Or whatever, but we prefer the 5 stars.
I mean, yeah. Like, please don't give us a 1 or 2. You're going to stand out.
Right. You're going to be that guy.
I don't want to challenge people to give us a 1 or 2, so cut that out. They'll see it on our YouTube, though. But anyway, please go to iTunes and give us a rating or review. It really does help us reach more creative entrepreneurs with Being Boss. Even if you're listening to us on SoundCloud or Stitcher, the iTunes ratings really do help. Okay, but let's go ahead and get into this episode, which is feeling like a fraud.
Yeah. Let's dive into it. So we had an email question, and it actually, is this the one that came from Facebook? Do you want to read this? I haven't read this.
Well, we have a ton of, so we didn't necessarily get an email question about feeling like a fraud, but I went on our Facebook group, which is now about 600 members. So that's another thing. If you want to join our Facebook, go to facebook.com/groups/beingboss.
Yeah.
It's a private Facebook group so that you can talk about your side hustle, even if you're still working a day job. But we have a lot of activity going on in there. And I asked everyone in there what makes them feel like a fraud. And here were just a few of the responses. One person said that she felt like a fraud whenever people question her prices. She said, sometimes when people question my prices, I get a mixed reaction of feeling angry/self-doubt. She said, I just stick to my guns. But I think we all know, even when someone's like, why do you charge that? It can make you just bristle
like
up. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And we had someone else say, it's absolutely having to do with any kind of phone communication. I can talk to people face to face or through email all day long, but the phone just makes me angry and stuttery. I'm terrible on it, and I have a scheduled phone call with a national retailer tomorrow.
That one surprised me just because I have the things that make me feel like a fraud, but getting on the phone, sometimes I feel like a total spaz, but it doesn't make me feel like a fraud. All right, some other people said, if I start actively looking at what my competitors are doing, that's when I slip into my funk. Why bother? Someone else is already doing a great job. Oh my gosh, I can relate to that one.
Yeah, me as well. Let's see, we had another one that said, I don't have an art degree and I've never sold my art before. I don't know at what point I will feel qualified to call myself an artist, especially when I look at others' art and it's so amazing.
Someone else said, I'm struggling with feeling like a fraud right now. It happens when potential work never comes to fruition. Specifically, I've had a few potentials just never call me back. As in, we had great communication, talked about the project, I put the work on my calendar, and then I just don't hear from them again.
Yeah, and I'm just realizing too, everyone gets to see my facial expressions now of like you
Oh,
reading
right.
things and me like making faces. So that's gonna be
I
fun.
know,
You
like I
definitely
can't.
have to go to YouTube now and watch Emily make faces at Kathleen, and then Kathleen's gonna make faces at me too. It's gonna be great. Um, so we had another one. For me, it's get stirred up when big things are happening. Moving into a launch phase, getting asked to speak at a conference, but OMG, what if they find out I'm a fraud?
And then my favorite one was someone who feels like a fraud when she can't believe someone is paying her to do the work that comes so easily to her. Which,
Yeah,
wow,
that's a
hit me
big
in the
one.
heart with that one. I get it. So, Emily, I'm curious, what makes you feel like a fraud?
Oh, all the things make me feel like a fraud. No, I think my biggest fraudulent fears come whenever I try to look at my own big picture. So for me, I have grand goals for what I want to accomplish in my life, and one of those is I want to be a millionaire, and I want to invest in small businesses and help entrepreneurs reach their dreams in a bigger way than just building brands and websites, which is where I'm currently at in my like big life goals. And though I'm getting much more comfortable with that big dream, when I compare that to where I am now, I always have this moment where I'm like, who the hell do you think you are trying to like do all of these things or having such big goals? So I kind of have to remind myself that it's in baby steps. But
Or
one
do you
of my
ever feel like it's like whenever I feel like a fraud with my big goals, it's like you should have figured this shit out already.
Yeah. Like,
Like
why aren't you
that
there already?
feeling.
Like, you've been in this for 5 years. Why are you just
Yeah.
like still doing brands and websites? But this is also like a 40-year goal or
Yeah.
those sorts of things. So, for me, like looking at the big picture and setting big goals, which is something that I truly believe in, is setting really big goals for yourself. I believe in it, but it doesn't mean that I don't look at my goals sometimes and think that I'm a total fraud.
Anything else that makes you feel like a fraud?
Um, on a smaller scale, just being asked to do projects that are a little out of my comfort zone. Like if someone comes to me and wants a website that's a little bigger than the websites that I've built before, or if it's a consulting project where they're asking me to consult with them on things that I haven't personally done myself, maybe, but I've seen other people do. So it's just like being asked to do things that are a little bit out of my comfort zone, but also getting paid to do it. Sometimes I feel like a bit of a fraud. What about you, Kathleen?
Like whenever you were pitching the idea of this podcast, I was like, I really don't think I've had that feeling like a fraud feeling in a long time. So I really had to dig deep. I've certainly had vulnerability hangovers, and whenever everyone else in our Facebook was listing out what makes them feel like a fraud, I was like, oh yeah, that definitely gives me funny feelings. Like speaking.
Yeah.
Definitely a huge vulnerability hangover afterwards, but I never really feel like a fraud necessarily. So anyway, but what I came up with was I feel like a fraud whenever there is a miscommunication or lack of clarity around expectations with my clients. So, for example, whenever a client thinks that they're going to come out of a branding engagement with me with a website, like, and usually it's clarified before even the contract phase, of course. But whenever they're like, okay, so what about my website? And I'm like, oh, I don't do that. Let me hand you
Right.
off to my friend Emily. She
Sure.
can do that for you. Um, so that always makes me feel just kind of awkward. Or whenever someone wants me to read all of the books that they've written before I brand them, and it's like I don't have time to read every book you've ever written before I brand you. Branding is about the outer layer of who you are, not about all the deeper content. But then it still makes me feel funny, like that they
Yeah.
expected me to do that and I'm not delivering on it. But okay, here's the thing that really makes me feel like a fraud, and it's whenever I am feeling or being judgmental, or even jealous about someone else.
Yeah.
So, for example, like Marie Forleo is a genius, right? And
Yes.
nobody can deny that. But sometimes I'll look at her stuff and I'll be like, ugh. I mean, I could have said that. Anyone could have said that. Who does she think she is? Which in
Right.
turn, like having negative feelings about other people it's usually like whatever negative feelings you're having about yourself.
Yep.
And so then I can just turn it on myself and be like, who do I think I am? So I guess
Yeah.
that's whenever I feel like a fraud. And it is kind of seeing what I want. So yeah, I want to be like Marie Forleo. Who doesn't? Or at
Sure.
least have that kind of success with that kind of product. So I see what I want and I'm just not there yet. I guess that I don't know that it's feeling like a fraud, but it certainly doesn't feel good.
Yeah. Good. Well, no, not good. But we're saying all of this and being super open about our fraudulent feelings, just to sort of illustrate that's kind of part of the process, and you have to like move past it. So let's talk about how to move past your
Well, I was
fraudulent
going to say,
feelings.
even just in in our Facebook group thread there, whenever I ask people what makes you feel like a fraud, I mean, we probably had over 30 comments.
Yeah.
And just everyone else replying, they were like, wow, I didn't realize that everyone else had these feelings. So it is kind of shining a light on that. Shining a light on those feelings will make it feel less bad.
Yes. Oh yeah. Well,
So,
and I think this podcast is a perfect example. Like Kathleen and I pitched this podcast to Kathleen 3 months ago. It
yeah.
was only 3 months ago, and we both had moments where like, who are we to do a podcast? One, because neither of us had ever like done a podcast, and who are we to share this content with people, and who's going to listen to it? I mean, we definitely had these like fraud feelings, or there's like another word for
So,
it.
you know what? I mean, it's self-doubt.
It is. That's
Feeling
all
like
it
a fraud
is.
is feelings of self-doubt. And so what I would do if you're feeling like a fraud or you have imposter syndrome or you are feeling jealous, um, is to really figure out why you feel that way. So like ask yourself why. Why do I feel like a fraud right now? And really look at the triggers or the behaviors that are sparking these feelings. Like what is literally happening whenever you feel this way? So someone else in the Facebook group said every time she talks to her mom and her mom doesn't understand her job as a creative entrepreneur, and I think a lot of our parents don't, but that it makes her feel like a fraud. And so if that happens every time you talk to your mom, and she said that afterwards she'll call her best friend who totally gets what she's doing. It's like maybe just save the creative entrepreneur conversations for just your best friend. Or if for me it happens whenever, like one of my triggers and behaviors that's happening whenever I feel these feelings is whenever I'm just consuming other people's work, and especially whenever I'm looking at not necessarily competitors, because I don't really believe in competitors. I feel like there's enough room for everyone, and that's my hippie woo-woo self coming out. But certainly feeling like, oh, I wish I was there already. Um,
Yeah.
so it's time to get back to work. But that gets into later in our show notes,
Right.
all the
We'll
other
get to
stuff we're
that
going
in
to
a
talk about. I
second.
can't help it. I'm jumping ahead of myself.
No, it's fine. Well, and I agree with that completely. Like, you have to figure out what it is that you're doing that's making you feel like a fraud, and figure out how you can fix it. One of the ways that I like to think about it is the idea that everything you do in life, like everything you do, from like learning how to sit up to making your first big investment, is the first time you've done it. And so I think a lot of people have the feeling of being a fraud whenever they're asked to do something they've never done before, or especially if they're getting paid to do something that they've never actually done exactly like that before. But that's just part of the process. Is you have to sort of get out of your comfort zone and do new things and get over that like self-doubt and those fraudulent feelings. I'm just gonna start calling them fraudulent feelings. Can I call them that?
Yeah.
That sounds like fun.
So it's funny because you were talking about like you have to learn how to do things for the first time. And obviously with my 1-year-old, and I don't know if you experience this with Lily, who is now 7. So like watching our kids try new things for the first time, Fox is so little that he's not self-conscious at all about trying new things. He just gets mad about it. And maybe that's how I feel whenever I'm trying new things. Like I just get mad about it. So I think that speaks to like perfectionist tendencies. But then, so it's interesting, like what we can learn from our kids who are trying things for the first time. Like, how does Lily approach things? Like, will she give up if she can't do it good the first time, or does she keep trying?
It depends on what it is. I mean, she always makes me really proud of like how persistent she can be, which is both pride and anger sometimes at how persistent she can be. But she definitely has moments where she'll be doing something just to sort of like have a moment of temper tantrum of like, oh, I can't do this. but it's kids bounce back so easily, and like I'm sad that adults lose that. I guess as you get older, is you let frustration stop you. Whereas kids will let frustration, they'll deal with it for a minute, and hopefully they'll just do it again until they get it right. And I think that's kind of part of it, is they don't let this sort of self-doubt or fear of being unworthy or whatever stop them from trying again and again and again until they get it right.
Yeah. So I was going to say like that I think that one way to conquer feelings of fraudulent feelings is to stop trying to get better at the stuff that you suck at and just focus on the stuff that you're really good at. But what we were just saying here makes me question that, actually, because kids try over and over and over again. Even if they suck at something, they keep trying. So I guess it's stop trying to get better at the stuff you suck at if you hate doing it.
Yes, that's what I was about to say. It's not about whether or not you're good at it. It's whether or not you like doing it. I mean, if you want to learn how to code a website or something, and you are
I don't,
right, you are determined to do it. But you get into it and you really hate it, like, don't, do some soul-sucking work to do something that you don't want to do. Find someone to do it, and you go find something you want to do. My big thing is always be learning. Always be learning, but also learning what you like to do and what you don't like to do. So wasting tons of money to go back to school to be a graphic designer when you actually hate being a graphic designer and you want to find something else is a waste. Like, find the things that you want to learn and then learn them. And it always kind of baffles me how that idea of being like a lifelong learner is always kind of put on the back shelf. Like, I'm one of those people, I love to learn new things, love to. And a couple of months ago, I told David, I was like, I need to learn like this new like web coding language. Like, it's just a thing I feel like for me to move forward, I just need to learn it. And he kind of like looked at me kind of funny, and he's like, it always kind of baffles me how okay you are with just like learning something new. And I was like, what do you mean? Like, don't you? Like, why wouldn't you just want to go learn something new? And I think having that mindset of just never stopping learning something new is so important for moving forward, and just constantly being a sponge of what's going around you, but also what you feel about the things that you're learning is really important.
I think that you and I have both read enough books from experts, and probably the one thing that they all have in common is they're all constantly learning something new. I don't know that it's necessarily tech skills or like a skill necessarily. I think especially maybe the older you get, what is old dog, new tricks?
Right.
Right.
We are horrible at those sayings. We should just stop.
Not trying. My sister always makes fun of me. She says that I'm like, she jokes that, I just sound like English isn't even my first language whenever it comes to like idioms and cliches because I always mix them and I never know what they are.
Yeah, I do too. It's fine.
Okay, so what I was going to say about that though is that there's something so liberating. Like it's nice to always learn more, and I think that just reading new books and watching TED Talks, that kind of stuff is really great. Again, but that's the stuff that sometimes makes me feel bad. Like
Yeah, it can be
I'm not
intimidating.
there. But so I was going to say there's something like liberating about just letting it go. And so my example of this, and like the stop doing stuff that you suck at, is whenever I was still working in advertising, my sister was actually my creative director. And I worked in advertising for 5 years. And she has, like, her background is in, we both have a background in graphic design. And then she went more into the copywriting route. And I went more into the, like, hardcore graphic design side of things. But she could do it all. And I felt like whenever I was working under her, she expected me to do it all, which I think she kind of did. And she was trying to groom me to become a copywriter. And I would try, and it was just awful. Like, especially ad copy is awful. I'm just not good at it. I love writing for my blog, and I love writing for talks and stuff like that, and like writing out our agendas for this podcast. But I cannot write ad copy to save my life. And I still don't write our client ad copy, even though I think maybe I could now. But after just watching Tara and our brand director Liz do it for so long. Anyway, I remember one day just saying, I think I was crying, and I came to her and I said, I just can't do copy. And she was like, you know what? Let's just take you off of trying to ever even do copy. Stop trying to figure it out. Just focus on design. And it was so liberating. It was like I didn't realize what a weight had been on me until it was lifted. And so I would challenge and invite our listeners to ask yourself, like, what have you been trying to do that you don't like doing that you could just liberate yourself from if you just said, I'm going to stop doing this thing?
Yeah, I have a perfect example of that as well. So a couple of years ago, I guess, I don't know, 2 years ago? Yeah, 2 years ago, I'd sort of like hit a ceiling in my business where like I was doing all the work and I was making as much money as I could because I couldn't work anymore. I needed to like figure out what I needed to change in my business. And it was one of those things where I was doing like the financial side of my business. I was doing all the invoicing and I was doing like all the money things. I was even like prepping for taxes. I was doing like all of that gross stuff myself. And I remember sitting down with David one day. This is whenever David became my like business manager. I sat down with David one day and I was like, I can't do this. Like I cannot run a business like this. And it's like I felt like a fraud, like trying to run a business. I knew nothing about like finances and like how to run the financial side of a business. And so it was one of those moments where I just sort of had to sit down with him and say, what do we need to do to fix this? Because I was sucking at managing like the money side of my business and doing all of the client work on top of it. And that was the point where David said, don't worry about it anymore. Like I will take over the side of your business and I will do it for you and I will get your budget figured out and I will take care of your bookkeeping. And 2 years later, he runs the business side of my business completely by himself and does a fantastic job at it. And so now I don't have to feel like a fraud entrepreneur who's trying to build a business but can't even handle my own bookkeeping because I was able to stop doing the thing that I was really sucking at and hand that off to someone else so that I could be really amazing at what I was good at.
Yeah, I think that whenever it comes to being a business owner and wearing a lot of hats, which you do at first, you can really feel like a fraud whenever you don't know it all.
Yeah.
But here's the deal. To be an expert, you don't have to know it all. And to be a good business owner, you don't have to do it all. So I think that it just comes down to getting really clear on what you are best at, getting really clear on your core genius, and rocking that out.
Amen.
Amen.
I completely agree with that. Finding finding that clarity for yourself is huge. And I agree with the expert comment. I remember whenever I first started working with Braid a long time ago, you guys like made me like sit down and claim my like web design expertise because I was having a problem like calling myself an expert for no good reason. I was doing it and I was launching websites and I had clients who loved me and loved the websites that I was giving them. But it was like one of those self-doubt things, like, can I really call myself an expert? And I felt like a little bit of a fraud saying that until you guys like sat me down and was like, Emily, you've got to own this because you can't move forward until you own your expertise. And I remember like sitting down with it and like having like thoughts about it. And I remember coming to the realization that claiming you're an expert doesn't mean that you're claiming that you know everything. It doesn't mean that you're claiming to be fault-free or that you can answer everyone's questions. And I remember writing a blog post and saying something to the effect of, even superheroes need sidekicks.
Yes, I remember that.
Yeah, because it's true. It's true. I mean, claiming your expertise or moving forward in your business doesn't mean that you are not going to make mistakes. You can't live your life or build a business without making occasional mistakes. And once you can wrap your head around that and get used to it, it's all fine and dandy.
So I guess like I'm thinking here that the opposite of feeling like a fraud is probably feeling like an expert. And so many people put that title expert on a pedestal and they attach a story to it. And so whenever I think about an expert, I think about someone who knows everything, someone who never makes mistakes, so essentially someone who is perfect.
Yeah.
And that doesn't exist.
Nope.
Perfection is not real. And so I think if you can just redefine, I mean, we've talked in earlier episodes about redefining professional. It is being able to embrace your expertise by defining what that looks like for you. So we have an entire section in our Braid e-course about just embracing your expertise and what that really means. And in one part, we talk about how for every, like if you're an expert, like let's say you're a fourth grader and you want to be an expert fourth grader, you might feel really bad if you're looking at high school students and you're like, oh, but they're so much better than me. But here's the deal. There are always third graders and second graders and first graders to your fourth grader. So sometimes to be an expert, you just need to be 2 steps ahead of who you're helping.
Yeah. Yes. Oh, yes. That's exactly what it means. This is something I felt a lot recently as I'm like moving into much more of a coaching role, is that I don't have it all figured out. And actually, even this podcast, like we tell people this all the time, we do not have this all figured out. Like if we did, we would be millionaires right now. And we would be like, we would not be recording a podcast. We'd be laying on a beach with cocktails.
That's not true. So I started listening to, we would be doing the work, I think, even if we were millionaires.
Yeah.
I'm just going to throw that out there.
Yes.
But I was listening to the Ask Gary V show yesterday, his podcast, and he did, I was just putting it all together because I'm not familiar with his work, which now I feel stupid because he's like a big deal.
Yeah.
The book, and you mentioned it to me before, Emily, it's called
Jab, 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 Right
Hook. Okay. So I was listening to his podcast and he talked about that book, and I was on a walk with my baby, pushing the stroller, listening to his podcast, and he said, and this is just yesterday, he goes, if you're calling yourself an entrepreneur and you're not working 16 to 17 hours a day, you are full of shit. And I'm sitting there like walking my baby in this really nice weather, thinking about like our podcast and listening to this podcast and just trying to continually learn more about growing my business and being an entrepreneur and investing and all that. And I'm in the middle of the day, it's 3 p.m. and I'm taking my baby for a walk.
Yeah.
And I was like, well, I'm not working 16 or 17 hours a day. Am I full of shit?
Well, and are you though? Like, you have to think about that too, because I usually spend about 8 hours a day at the studio, generally. Sometimes more. I definitely will pull a 12-hour day occasionally, but only because I sincerely love what I do. And I look at the clock and I'm like, oh my God, it's like 8 o'clock at night. It's dark outside. Like, we've been having so much fun. But whenever I leave the studio, quite often I go home and I go upstairs to the bedroom, and I usually give myself like 30 minutes of like defrost time where like I just need to like get in the headspace of like home life. But that means that I have my iPad and I'm going through Instagram and I'm liking all the being boss photos, or I'm on Twitter, tweeting or reading or retweeting or whatever. Like, I'm still kind of working. And then I'll go down to dinner, and after dinner, David and I will sit and talk about what we're doing the next day, or what our big plans are, or what our next big move is. So in a lot of ways, like, I may not be hardcore hustling 17 hours a day, but I'm definitely like in the entrepreneurial mindset 16 to 17 hours, except I actually sleep a lot though. So I'm not even awake 17 hours a day.
And I wonder like how much of it, again, I know I bring this up and I know that lots of guys listen to our podcast too, but I wonder if it is something with us being women and moms with a family. I mean, sorry, Gary V, but I can't work 16, 17 hours a day whenever I have a 1-year-old baby. But even if you don't have kids, you are still an entrepreneur and you can still be an expert without working 16, 17 hours a day. And
Right.
I like that he challenged my thinking on that, and he challenged my work ethic, because then I could come back around and feel really good about what I'm doing. Because like you said, my job and being boss, this podcast, it's like my baby.
Yeah.
And I'm working on it really hard too, and I'm constantly thinking about it. So I just thought it was kind of interesting that.
Right. Well, I don't feel like a fraud entrepreneur because I'm not in the studio 17 hours a day. So I'm going to erase that like variation or that version of entrepreneur and use my own with no self-doubt about it.
No self-doubt about it.
All right, so let's talk about like how to deal with this fraud mindset a little bit more, and talk about some like good habits you can get into to just constantly battle the thoughts that pop into your head about why am I doing this, or who do I think I am trying to do this.
You go first.
Me go first. So for me, I love to do this like test and change thing, and I do this a lot with my clients. I have a couple clients I think that at this point are kind of tired of hearing it because one of my biggest philosophies for simply like moving forward in business and really doing anything is that you're never going to get it right the first, or you're rarely going to get it right the first time, because we are not born with all information in our brains. We are not like these all-knowing beings. That's not what we do. So it's just about being okay with testing and changing. And if you put something into play, whether that's a new service or pricing structure or how you send emails, and if it doesn't work for you, change it. And I think being nimble like that in your life and business is huge for recognizing that any fraudulent feelings you may be having can be temporary, or at least shut them down because you're learning. And I think you actually do become a fraud if you are okay with not learning anymore and not testing and changing
Yes, like
constantly.
whenever you think you know all the answers,
Yeah.
that's when you're probably a fraud.
No, you are, because you don't know all the answers.
Okay, so I think that both of you and I are really good about launching before we're ready. And I think that that's what keeps a lot of creative entrepreneurs from actually doing this thing, is that they want everything to be ready and they want everything to be perfect. And I coach a lot of
Never
creatives
happens.
who want things to be perfect and ready out of the gate. And so even this podcast, we just kind of made it happen. But here we are 12 episodes in, and we're figuring it out.
Yeah.
Even with the YouTube video, we were talking about how we need to have an intro, and maybe we do some like voiceover over a slide. And I was like, I don't want to deal with editing it, but I want to get it up. So maybe next time we'll do that, or maybe next time we'll have like a little Being Boss cardboard image that we can hang up in front of the screen so that we can do less editing. But again, like I think it is about kind of, you said test and change. I think it's also launching before you're ready.
Yeah,
And just
definitely.
kind of stepping into it. So I'm reading, is it Anne Lamott or Annie Lamott?
Oh, I don't know about that.
Okay, so her name is Anne Lamott, and she wrote a book called Bird by Bird, and I'll be sure to include that in the show notes. And it's for writers, and she's writing on writing and how to become a better writer. And one of the things that she talks about are your shitty first drafts. And Becky Murphy, who's a friend and illustrator, she gives a whole talk. She gave a whole talk at the Circles conference. I'll include a link to that about embracing your shitty first drafts also. And so I think that is part of it, is just having a shitty first draft and being okay with it and knowing that you can always go back and change and update later.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, everything I've ever launched, everything you've ever launched, I mean, everything. It's always a first draft, or at least like maybe third draft
Totally.
sometimes. But even then, like I launched Indie Boom a year ago. It was a program that I just sort of like made up, but based on like all the work that I'd done with my clients. And when I relaunched it this year, it looked different. Like, welcome to draft number 2.
Yeah.
Because you test it and then you change. So I tested it for a year with my clients and I saw what worked and what didn't. So whenever I relaunched it, I erased all the like pieces that didn't work as well and replaced them with the ones that did. And that's how you play the game.
Yeah.
Test and change.
I think at Braid, what we do is we're kind of more like refining and tweaking as we go. And so with the Braid method, we send out a start deck where we're asking certain questions. We're constantly refining that deck so we can ask better questions.
Yeah.
So again, tweaking and refining as you go. Nothing is permanent and everything is always changing.
Yes. Oh, actually, a great example of this. So did you see the Apple keynote recently?
No.
Oh, Kathleen, I need you to get nerdier, please.
I have thought about subscribing to yesterday on my walk after listening to Gary Vee telling me that I'm full of shit because I work 16 hours a day. I thought I need to start subscribing to like Fastco and...
Yeah, Ink Uncensored.
Oh, yeah,
Ink Uncensored is my favorite podcast at the moment. I love it. It's a really quick one, and they just talk about like the business landscape really quickly, like a couple of like business news. It's really great. And I will just sort of to say something nicer about Gary Vee for a second. I love his book, and I need you to read it, Kathleen.
Oh, I know. So I knew that you read it, so I was like, either Emily can give me the Cliff Notes, or I should say this too, because I actually really enjoyed everything he was saying, and he cusses a lot, and I was like, oh, and we cuss, so like maybe we need to cuss more. But okay, note, he does not have the little red E next to his podcast.
Shame on him.
And he literally every other word he's cussing, which I don't have a problem with at all. I love it.
Right.
But it made me think like we need to get the little red E off of our...
No, I love it. It's like a badge of courage for me.
Like I can say whatever I want.
I can, and now no one can get mad at me about it. It's perfect. So no, I do love his book though, and just to like give that a shout out while we're talking about it. As far as social media goes, I read his book over Christmas, and I made Chris read it in the studio as well, and started like implementing some things, and like more than doubled my Instagram following in 2 months, like just based on like the knowledge that's in that. And we've been like doing some things on Twitter and Facebook too, and it's huge. Like,
hey, you know what else will double your Instagram following?
What?
Have a baby.
Oh, I know, right? No, thanks. I don't need Instagram followers that bad. You did though. You really like grew a mom following on Instagram.
I grew a big mom following after I had a baby. But I try not to post photos of him anymore. Sorry, I keep derailing the conversation. So what were you going to say?
It's I don't remember. I was talking about Gary Vee. The book is good, but it was
jab, jab, right hook. You were talking about social media.
Test and change. I don't know. Regardless, it'll probably come back to me in a minute. Another thing that I like to do whenever I'm feeling like a fraud is to sit down and find proof that I'm not. Because there is tons of proof that you're not. Self-doubt is one of those feelings that will just come out of nowhere. Like, I can go home and want to make a thing of soup, and like, I'm good at making soup. But like self-doubt feelings can occasionally just sort of creep up. And the key, I think, is to like put them to rest. Just simply like find whatever proof you need. So if someone is contacting you to do a project, and for example, the comment that said she couldn't believe someone was wanting to pay her for something so easy. It's easy for you, but is it easy for them? And is it going to be worth it for them to pay you to do it? And if people have paid you to do it in the past and they've gotten really great results, there's your proof. It's worth it for someone else to pay you to do it. And so you can sort of create those like little proof scenarios constantly in anything, where you can prove to yourself that those self-doubt feelings that you're having are totally just bullshit.
Okay, can I share an actual exercise that people can do to find proof? Okay, so this is an actual exercise that we take our Braid Method clients through. What I want you to do, unless you're driving or working out, but maybe later, get out a sheet of paper and draw 2 big circles on it that are overlapping in the middle. And on the left circle, label it past. And on the right circle, label it future. And I want you to write down 5 of your biggest victories ever, or it could be more business related. So 5 big victories in your past that have already happened. And that's kind of what you were talking about, Emily, your proof. I also think that, again, we talked about feeling like a fraud whenever we're trying new things or whenever we have a whole bunch of ideas of things that we want to accomplish and we don't know how to get there. So in your future circle on the right, I want you to write down like 5 big dreams, right? And so, Emily, you even said that you get overwhelmed whenever you get lost in your big picture, and it can make you feel like a fraud. So I want you to put those kinds of big dream visions, like the who do I think I am dreaming this big vision. I want you to put that in the right circle. And then the middle overlap is like your present priorities. And these are the things that you need to focus on to get where you want to be. And so some of it is honoring your past accomplishments, but also kind of like moving forward from them, but taking what you can from it and bringing it into your present overlap. So like, for example, I don't really have a good example.
I have a good example.
Okay.
So going back to the same comment about she can't believe people are paying her to do what she does so easily.
Yeah.
One of my good example. One of my past ones is just the fact that I've been coding websites for 5 years. Actually, I've been coding websites for like 12 years. No, probably more than that. Very long time. So at this point, and that's like a past accomplishment. Like I'm an expert at coding some websites.
And so what's a big future vision?
A big future vision is to build out my studio so I don't have to code as many websites anymore. Which is a big goal of mine, so that I don't want to be a 40-year-old web designer. That is not my goal in life. So for me, it's to set up enough in the studio so that I can do designs, or maybe have someone else do designs one day and have someone else code it. So have a studio that doesn't need me as much as it currently needs me. So I think a really great overlap in that, that is the overlap, is I have the experience and I have the future goal, and
so what would your present overlap? Like the proof from the past and then the future vision, like how would you say that those combine in your present priorities?
I think it's just teaching. Like I need to take how I code things and how I do it really efficiently and cleanly and turn it into almost like a teaching module that I can teach someone here, or maybe even a future e-course. Who knows about how it is that I code websites, and that proof piece in that, I think, in going back to the idea of having people pay me to do something that I can do easily. Like I can code a website up so clean and so fast, and I love doing it. Like I get really nerdy and I hunker down here with my blanket and my like hot tea, and I will code for like 4 hours, and then I'll have a site almost done in just a couple of hours. I used to feel bad about the fact that people paid me to do something that I did so easily, but I also remember how long it took me to gain the experience to do it as quickly and as easily as I want. And that sort of proof piece, I don't care. You will pay me a ton because it will be coded cleanly and very quickly.
Okay, so here's one for me that kind of maybe brought up some fraudy feelings, which is as fraudy I was taking fraudy feelings. Whenever I was taking our clients through the braid method, it would get really personal really fast. And that's whenever Tara and I noticed in our work that there is a huge blend in our personal lives and our professional lives, and that who we are at work affects how we live at home. So I decided to get life coach training with Martha Beck. And so I'm in a 7-month training with a bunch of other what they call cadets. And you're supposed to get 30 hours of training and of like practicing life coaching. And so I thought, well, if I'm going to do 30 hours of training, I want to get paid at least a little bit for it. So I launched a small life coaching offering, and I think I was literally charging maybe like $30 a session. Now I charge at least $2,500 for like a 6-week session. So it's quite significantly more. Right. And I grew that number from $30 a session to $2,500 for 6 sessions in about, I would say, a year. And I was still watching some of the other cadets, though, who were really talented, but maybe didn't quite have the platform that I had, not get any clients. And so I started to feel funny. But then I think it's embracing that I'm just naturally, it's a natural talent, the coaching. And I love doing it, and it comes easily, and I'm getting clients. Why am I feeling bad about it? So I think that's it, is it came too fast.
Well,
So I
and
think
I
that
don't
whenever
even think
you're,
that that's it, if I may, because
yeah,
I think where your proof comes from is the work that you've done. And what has probably happened, and I don't know these other people, but maybe they didn't get gung-ho about starting that expertise as quickly as you did, or market it as much, or the fact that you had been blogging for how many years?
exactly.
And building up that following so that you had the people to pitch it to that actually purchased it. So I think proof comes from just looking in the past and seeing all the work that you have done, and like realizing if it's actually worth it. And I think in your case it's definitely worth it because you have the experience behind you to like be that proof, and they just don't have that experience, or they're not doing the work now to prove that they have that experience. Make sense?
Totally makes sense. One of the other things I think you can do whenever you have fraudy feelings
Fraudy feelings.
is to get really clear on what you're doing, to define your role and write it down on paper. And so Tara and I are constantly having little summits with each other where we're talking about the future of Braid, but we're really talking about our roles within our organization. And so even recently, this last weekend, we had one of those tough business conversations where we were talking about, my sister and I were talking about being boss. And Emily and I, like, we were talking about our partnership and what that means for Braid, what it means for indie shopography, what it means for the future of being boss. What if we want to expand and grow this beyond being boss? How does that work? And so just getting really clear on your role. And okay, so another example, even when we started this podcast, I was like, okay, we can do a podcast, but I am not going to edit it. Like, I just know that that's not my strength. And you were like, it's cool, I can do it. And we naturally fell into leadership roles, but like within our own ways of what we're doing for the podcast. So I think that that's been really cool. Just, I guess, testing it out and changing and tweaking along the way and seeing what rises to the top. So that's another one, is just give it time and see what rises to the top.
Yeah, see what you're good at, see what you suck at, or simply don't want to do, and go from there. I agree. I think clarity, I feel like clarity plays such a huge role in everything that we talk about. But I think it's clarity with what you do, like in your business, but also clarity in what you do for your clients. Because I feel like a lot of those fraudy feelings come whenever expectations from clients end up being miscommunicated or not communicated, or whatever that may be. Clarity in all parts of your business, I think, will keep those self-doubt feelings from coming up because you're clear on what you're doing.
Yes.
What's
What
next,
else?
Kathleen? So I want to talk about boundaries for half a second.
Wait, sorry, I have to interrupt. One more thing, because it's on your list and you didn't really cover it, but I think it's really important, is to trust that you'll know what to do when the time comes. Trusting yourself is huge whenever it comes to embracing your expertise.
It is. And I wrote that down. I can't believe I missed that one because that's like my shining one today. Is I believe so much in trusting that you will know the answers when the time comes. So for me, with my big dreams of like investing in businesses and like really sort of helping entrepreneurs for the rest of my life, and these really big dreams that I have, whenever I have these like fraudulent feelings, I always have to sit and like stop myself and say, okay, Emily, right now your core purpose is rocking out indie boom projects for your clients, and you will know what the next step is when the time comes. And that sort of helps me like dissipate whatever fraudy feelings I'm having, because I simply trust that the path will will illuminate itself for me as
No,
I go
it's
along.
so true. It is so true. And I have found it more and more in my business whenever I set an intention and I say it
Yeah.
out loud for what I want. So, okay, let's talk about this, Emily.
Perfect.
4 years ago, we decided we wanted to do a workshop together.
Yep.
Total failure.
Total
Completely
failure. We had
flopped.
one person sign up and we refunded.
We refunded them. But now, what, 4 years later,
Yep.
we have this platform where we're actually planning on having a little retreat.
Yeah.
And it's probably going to happen.
Yep.
If not, we're
No,
still going to
it's going to happen. What are you talking about?
We're going to hang out on the beach together either way.
Yes.
But now it might actually happen. It happened 4 years later.
Yeah.
So
We
you
did
have
the
to
work.
let things, we did the work, and you have to let things unfold on their own timeline.
Yes.
And just trust that by having that idea in the first place is enough.
Yes, it is.
I mean, obviously you have to
imagine
do
if
the
we had
work.
stopped. Imagine if we had not done anything else ever again
I
because we
know.
failed that one time.
I mean, we kind of did stop that. I never knew. I could have never imagined that it would have come full circle. But we did the work, and so I'm saying contradicting things, and I think that brings up something else. Put a pin in that thought because it brings up something else that someone else on our Facebook said. But I think that, we talk so much about doing the work, but sometimes having an idea is enough. And you have that idea, you let the path unfold along the way, and because you had the idea, you can spot it a little bit easier whenever the opportunity arises on your path.
yeah.
So the opportunity has arisen again for
Right.
us, and we're going to make it happen. And so do that. But I wanted to mention really quick that someone else on our Facebook, she is a holistic nutritionist, and she's a good friend of mine. So I'm just going to say her name. I don't think she'll mind. But my friend Claire, she has a website called vidiacleanse.com, and I'll include it in the show notes. But one of the things that she struggles with is being a very highly spiritual person, but then also being a businesswoman. And I think a lot of yogis and wellness professionals struggle with this because they don't know how to balance their desire to do good in the world with their desire to make bank.
Yeah, I see that a ton too.
So Claire said that she was talking to her Ayurvedic coach, and her coach said, listen, you just need to embrace these dualities in yourself. You are going to have contradictions in yourself, and if you can embrace them, you won't feel like a fraud anymore. So I love that. I thought it was
that's a
really
good
valuable.
one. I completely agree with that. High five.
High five.
High five.
And amen.
So going back though for a second with the idea of setting these goals. So you and I had a goal a couple years ago that we were going to do this workshop. We set the goal. We tried it then. It didn't work. But it was still something that was like on our horizon. I never emailed you and said, you know what, Kathleen, this failed. I never want to speak to you again. It wasn't anything like that. I mean, we shut it down and we just sort of didn't talk about it for a while. And we kept on our path, working our little asses off, doing what we do and keeping in touch and becoming really good friends. So we set these goals, and then you just sort of have to take baby steps. And I think one of the best things that you can do, and this works better for more short-term goals sometimes than long-term goals, because like I said, the path, you'll figure it out as you go. But for short-term goals, it's about defining those baby steps, because baby steps are much easier and less intimidating to take than the big steps to whatever big goal that you finally taken. So if you really want to get over these fraudy feelings, then define those baby steps and then do the work. Actually start making it to your goals.
Yeah, get out of your head and actually do the work. So you and I could have been oh, let's start a podcast and spend 3 months just planning it. Yeah. But you know what we did? We literally got on the phone the next day and hit record and launched our podcast. Yeah. Was it perfect? No, but it doesn't matter because now we're actually doing it.
Yeah.
So
and
I think that's a huge part of it.
Definitely had moments too where we were what are we doing? we had some fraudy feelings in the very beginning, like those first couple of emails and talks that we had, where we just sort of like laid it out. Like, here's what we want to do, but here's how I actually kind of feel about it. What do you think? And Kathleen would be like, Emily, it's fine. Or I'd be like, Kathleen, get over it.
I think we had a big fraudy feeling whenever we had a pretty big flop of an interview.
Yeah.
So I'm just going to tell people that it happened.
Yeah,
I won't share details, but we had our first interview, and there are lots of reasons not to air it, but it just didn't go well. I didn't feel like I had any sort of control over the interview. And I listen to a lot of podcasts, so I listen to a lot of really good interviewers. So I felt like a total fraud. Like, who do I think I am? I can't even keep control of this conversation. There were also like tech problems and some other stuff that went awry.
The universe said don't air it. Like,
the universe said don't air it. And so even after that, like, my confidence was shaken. And so I would say, like, having the support system of Emily, like having a partner, and I know that a lot of you don't have business partners. Right. That's whenever you need to tap the rest of your creative pack. If you don't have a creative pack, get on our Facebook group, because it's happening there. Everyone is so supportive there. And you will make friends in real life from that group too. But you have to find a creative pack where you can share these feelings of insecurity so that you can get those self-doubts out and just be done with it.
Yeah. Well, and I also think, just I guess a finalish note on these fraudy feelings is something that you said in a previous episode about how, like, how you have to create these pathways in your brain, and self-doubt is something you train yourself to do over time. It's simply something that you begin as a child, or actually maybe a little past childhood, because you don't have as much self-doubt as a child. But it's one of those things that you pick up and you just keep doing forever, and it's just one of those things you have to train yourself to, like, get over it. Like, whatever self-doubt you're feeling is just fear that you have to shove in the back of your head and move forward anyway. That, like, and I'll say, and you too, like, I don't feel like a fraud very much anymore. Like, occasionally, whenever I look at my big dreams, I do, because they're big dreams. But on a daily basis, I don't. Like, I'll send out emails. I will tell people. Like, last year, I changed my web design project from about $7,000 for a project, and I jumped that price up to $24,000. And at that moment, I felt like a fraud, because I was doing 12-month engagements, and they were $24,000. I sold 4 of them. And, like, that is, like, I felt like...
So you're, like, done for the year.
Yeah, like, pretty much. And so, like, just knowing that whatever those self-doubt feelings that you have are, put them aside and move forward, because that's whenever really crazy, amazing things happen. I had crazy self-doubt whenever I launched Indie Boom. I erased every product and service that I did in my business and replaced it with one program that came in 6 and 12 months. And I sold more of those 12-month, $24,000 design packages than I did the 6-month ones. So it's just about, like, just get over it.
I think, and I think that the reason why we don't feel like frauds so much anymore is because we've done a lot of work, and we've had a lot of success, and we've had many failures. And whenever you have that much stuff happening, like, that's just a byproduct of doing the work, is that you will have successes and you will have failures. Yeah. And over time you will learn. You'll just learn how to cope with the feelings, and you'll be able to reframe them and get into a different mindset where you can use those feelings to fuel your business.
Yeah, I mean, at this point, if I ever feel fraudy feelings, I almost take that as a sign that I'm doing something right. Like, because I'm dreaming big enough, or I'm doing something crazy enough that is going to, like, put me on the map, or not. I mean, this podcast being a perfect example. Like, if we had kept with those fraudy feelings, we would not have this podcast. But because we were able to set them aside and do it anyway, like, we're reaching tons of people and helping so many people with their entrepreneurial journey.
And I think also, though, like, every time we hang up off of this podcast, we always have a little bit of a vulnerability hangover. Yeah. But guess what? It doesn't stop us. Like, we keep moving forward anyway, because we kind of just give ourselves permission to suck. So if you feel like a fraud, just give yourself permission to suck and keep going.
Yeah, we're all human and mistakes happen. And like ourselves aside, like think of anyone that you admire, whether that is Marie Forleo or Gary Vee or I don't know, Tony Robbins is someone who's in my actually both of our brain banks at the
Yeah.
moment. Like those sorts of people, they didn't let self-doubt stop them, and they did not, and goodness knows they probably all felt fraudulent at one point. But it's picking up and doing it anyway, just to see what happens, because you can always test and change. Nothing in life is unfixable unless you murder someone. That's kind
Oh,
of unfixable.
yeah, don't, what? You could like, what a way to end the
I'm just
episode.
saying, I'm getting real though. Like, don't murder people. But other than that, everything, everything is fixable. So test and change, do it.
All right. If you like what you...
Just had to go there. Make it clear that is unfixable.
Are you done talking about murder?
I am.
You have to edit that out. People will see it on the YouTube, but on the YouTube, I'm such a grandma. Okay. If you like what you've heard here today, you might like checking out some of our one-on-one services and digital products. I have a DIY Coaching for Creatives email series. It's $40 for 4 weeks of content delivered straight to your inbox. You can buy it anytime, learn more, and see if it's a fit for you at braidcreative.com.
And if you're a creative entrepreneur who's ready to step up your online game with a cohesive and strategic brand and website that totally rocks your socks and makes it easy for your dream customer to buy you, visit me at Indie Shopography and our one-on-one engagement Indie Boom, where we work with you to build an online presence that's tailored specifically to you and your business. And the best part is that we do many of these projects in partnership with Kathleen and Braid Creative to pull in their branding and business visioning expertise. So you get the best of both of our worlds and just the tools you need to build your dreams. You can find us at indieshopography.com.
All right. Thank you all for listening to Being Boss from Emily Thompson and Kathleen Shannon. Find our show notes for this episode at lovebeingboss.com. You can listen to past episodes and subscribe to new episodes on our website, at iTunes, and on SoundCloud. If you like our podcast, please show us some love by reviewing Being Boss on iTunes and sharing it with a friend. Do the work, be boss, and we'll see you next week. Bye.
Bye.